Hello, and welcome back to the Lithuanian Dream Podcast. My name's Sean Donovan, and every 2 weeks I'll be joining the podcast to look over the news and numbers in Lithuanian business. It's November 4th, 2020. Let's get started. According to a European Institute for Gender Equality survey, Lithuania went up a notch to the 22nd position in the European Union's latest Gender Equality Index. The index is scored from 0 to 100. Lithuania scored a 56.3, which is up 1.4 points from 2010, but still 11 points below the EU average. A lack of women in the government was the reason why Lithuania dropped from the 19th to the 23rd position in the index last year. However, that may be changing soon. In the recent Lithuanian parliamentary elections, Lithuania's conservative TSLKD party has won, and now its presumptive PM, Ingrida Šimonytė, is in coalition talks with two liberal governing partners, both of which are also led by female leaders. It is the first time in Lithuanian history when the liberal parties have gained such a large vote share. Also regarding the most recent elections, for the first time, an openly gay politician, Tomas Vytautas Raskevičius, has entered the Lithuanian parliament. Last year, we interviewed him on the podcast, which you can revisit in episode 5. We congratulate Lithuania for taking a progressive path towards the future and hope to hear similar news coming from the US elections as well. And that is our November 4th, 2020 episode. For a full downloadable report, please go to our website, lithuaniandream.com. Our report was prepared using information provided by the major Lithuanian news outlets, including Lithuanian National Broadcaster LRT, as well as Lithuanian business groups, including Startup Lithuania, Enterprise Lithuania, and the Bank of Lithuania. I'll be back with the news on the 17th of November. Thanks for listening. This was Sean Donovan with the Lithuanian Dream Podcast.
Hello and welcome. This is Ruta Naujokaite, and you're listening to Lithuanian Dream Podcast, a podcast exploring ideas about contemporary Lithuania.
Today, we will cover the topic of elections. As parliament elections just finished in Lithuania and American presidential elections are approaching the end, we wanted to invite a person who would help us understand both. That's why we decided to invite Juras Palukaitis, who is an active member of Lithuanian diaspora in the US and holds quite few titles. So first of all, he's the chairman of Southern District of Lithuanian Diaspora in US. As well, he's a member of Global Seimas. This is an initiative between Lithuanian Parliament and Lithuanian Global Diaspora organizations and works as a link for policy making and shaping, so it would reflect the needs of the global Lithuanians. And as well, he participated in Mūsų metas dabar initiative, which united more than 70 coordinators around the world who worked very hard for the last 3 months to make sure that all Lithuanians around the world would know that elections are happening and would actively vote in these elections. I as well participated in this campaign. It was fascinating, and I'm very happy that we reached a successful result. And now we have even 2 parliamentarians who are representing us in the parliament. Officially just one, but the second one got ranked for the party list due to the ranking of global Lithuanians. So I'm very happy to have Juras on our podcast and to get to know more about diaspora politics in the US.
Juras, thank you for joining us today.
Hello, Ruta.
I think it's the latest podcast interview I have ever recorded. It's 8 o'clock in the evening here in Berlin. And what time is it in Atlanta?
Right now it's 2 o'clock. It's 6 hours difference. So I guess you haven't spoken with Los Angeles yet.
Okay, I will put it on my list. Perfect. So I invited you because you live and work a lot with Lithuanian diaspora in the USA. And this community is very interesting for me because we are a podcast in English about Lithuania. And I know that there are a lot of Lithuanians who live in US. And actually, some of them already have just grandparents who came from Lithuania. So I would like to ask you, how does the Lithuanian community look like in the US?
Okay, maybe I'll say the 2 sentences or 3 about my own background, so that will help a little bit to understand where I'm coming from. I was myself born in Lithuania, in Kaunas, and right now I live abroad for 30 years. So it's a long time. I lived in Cleveland, Ohio. Then I moved back to Europe and lived in Amsterdam for 4 years. So I know Lithuanian, European young immigrants have friends among them. And then I moved back to United States, to Atlanta. And I live in Atlanta. Yes, I am involved in Lithuanian, all kind of activities, political and public. I am a chairman of Southern District of the United States Lithuanian American Community. There is 10 districts like this. That includes 8 southern states. And also it was a huge pleasure to participate in Dabar initiative, which is a nonpartisan initiative just to encourage and invite and inform Lithuanian diaspora to participate in Lithuanian political life and especially elections. And it was very successful, and it was a great pleasure to participate in that. Besides other things, I'm a member of Global Lithuanian Seimas as a representative from the United States. So a little bit about Lithuanian American community. Well, up to recently, it was by far the dominant diaspora community globally. But I don't know, I think United Kingdom is becoming the dominant right now. But up to very recently, and numbers are indeed huge. I think I would like to go with number 650,000, which is in Wikipedia. Wikipedia is a kind of source what everybody enjoys to laugh about, but, well, they rely on sources. Some people might say 1 million or something Lithuanians live in. Well, we forget one fact, but unfortunately, a lot of Lithuanian Americans are already elderly, and a lot of them are leaving them in huge numbers. So I don't think the Lithuanian American community as a whole is growing. It's most likely diminishing in size. But 650,000 is a number I would like to go to. There are 3 big generations, third wave, second and third wave. That would be a huge characteristic. It's also much, much older. We have a whole many of organizations, churches, club, what are celebrating centennial anniversary. 100 years. They been in 1920s, 15, newspapers and everything, long time ago. And it's huge. For European listeners, they always neglect that fact, how diverse America is inside and how big. Let's say I mentioned I'm a chairman of Southern District, which includes 8 southern states. So geographically, it's the same size as Germany and Italy combined. And I'm only 1/10, there is 9 more like this. So I guess this much I can say about Lithuanian American community.
Yes, for sure. So actually I heard in rumors that Chicago is second or first largest city of Lithuania. I know that it's not in your district.
Correct. I think it's totally true statement, but Chicago is the second most populous, where most Lithuanians live of any cities. Kaunas would be third probably after Chicago.
Yeah, so we already had the Gint Bolkus. His father, he actually grew up in Chicago, and Gint Bolkus, managed to bring Western Union to Lithuania. So a lot of achievements from Lithuanian American side in Lithuania. We as well spoke with Ruta Naujokaite, the writer who wrote several books, and in 2 of them, actually, the characters were Lithuanians. And there are plenty of amazing people living in the U.S. Lithuanian diaspora in the U.S. worked quite hard on bringing Lithuania freedom from Soviet Union, a lot of lobbying. Mm-hmm. So what is happening now? Are there any goals that Lithuanian diaspora in U.S. are working together?
Lithuanians always were involved politically. The Lithuanian American community is non-political organization. We cannot be biased in everything. But nevertheless, they are involved, always were involved politically. as far as contacting American politicians on behalf of Lithuanian interests, NATO and independence, of course, and then all kind of matters related to European Union and everything. That communication, it's a huge tradition. It always was alive and well, contacting congressmen and senators and everything. And, well, of course, there is election going on. So not as a community, but as an individuals, of course, Lithuanians are, I would say, quite involved into what's happening politically in the United States right now.
Yeah, so you actually manage and participate in quite few Facebook groups of Lithuanian Americans. Could you tell us more about how people engage in these groups and what kind of topics do you discuss and how does it help to maintain the community?
Well, it has been huge, I think, helping to connect Lithuanians. Not everyone likes it. Somebody fights it. But in general, it's unbelievable. Just like it helped to connect all kind of people who haven't seen each other for 20, 30 years, everything, and live in different countries. Same in Lithuania. It really helps to connect people who, don't have time much or can involve, but they like to come to these groups. And that's why a lot of these groups were created. I want to say something about actually first wave Americans, because first wave is Americans who came before World War I, before World War II, and they start creating communities, building churches and everything. Right now, of course, only their descendants are living. And before social media era, it's really hard to tell, they are living around us, because they definitely not active in Lithuanian community. Many of them don't speak Lithuanian. But when Facebook showed up, then those groups were created, and they mainly, and there is thousands of them. Seriously, thousands of them. And their main interest is tradition, culture, recipes, cuisine, genealogy. And they feel Lithuanian. It's something what's important and dear to them. So they use Facebook to connect into those groups, and they speak English there, and they really appreciate it. We travel to Lithuania, right now freely and everything. And all of a sudden, we have like thousands of these Lithuanians who don't speak Lithuanian. And there are all kinds of curiosities happening in these groups, because then like third wave Lithuanians who came after independence, after 1991, and they join these groups, they listen a little bit, and they immediately say like, well, you are not real, you're not real Lithuanians, and so on. And then these, sometimes some people lack tolerance and everything, and lack understanding of complexity of certain issues and everything. And then these groups sometimes start demanding what everything was posted supposed to be in 2 languages. And that, of course, caused conflicts. I also have to accept, it is a little bit strange to have Facebook group which has word Lithuanian in the name, which somehow starts restricting the use of Lithuanian language. It is a little bit bizarre to me, but if majority of people who are kind of looking for connection with Lithuania, we're looking for traditions, why have conflict with these people? Why not to be tolerant and friendly? Why not to understand the situation?
It's crazy. My mom actually joined Lithuanian Traditions, I think, group on Facebook.
Yeah, that's the one.
And my mom was like complaining to me. She was like, somebody added me to this group and I have no idea what they're posting. And I was like, Mom, maybe it's a sign you should learn English. It's like an important language to know. And as well, there's a magic thing. Facebook translates sometimes actually to your native language or the language you choose on your Facebook as a main language. So that helps, but I'm not sure if everybody gets that. I do sometimes, so maybe they're just testing. And with our podcast, I received that last week when I asked topics should we discuss, and somebody just wrote like, this is very interesting that Lithuanians talk with each other in English. And yeah, it's just
correct. Well, I didn't even know, but some of these groups have 12 or 15,000 members. So there are some members who don't speak Lithuanian, and there are some members from Lithuania probably who don't speak English. And yes, definitely, I always like to say people there is a Google Translate, look at the message. Most likely you're not even interested to know anything more. Just get an idea, But, there are some interesting topics even what we start discussing. For example, what makes you Lithuanian? And people from Lithuania are going to mention language first and foremost, but I actually would not agree with that. I think Lithuanian identity is what makes you Lithuanian. And that's a big concern for all because if you want your children to be Lithuanian, Lithuanian language will not do it. If he will grow up or Scotland or America, you have to grow up in Lithuanian to really have a Lithuanian identity. Well, if you're going to grow up in United States, you're going to have that specific Lithuanian American identity, but not Lithuanian proper identity. That's what I think.
But actually, it's not that, it's so different as well, even in the small, tiny Lithuania that is 7 times smaller than Germany, which is like, as you said, like just a half of one state in US, that actually in Lithuania, I'm from Vilnius, and now I keep meeting people from different cities and little cities and like Kaunas and Klaipėda. We all have different dialects. We all grow up in different generations. And that Lithuania we keep in our minds is not always the same. So, if we start looking for things that divide us, we can always find, especially during the elections.
Oh, yeah.
But
that's a time to discover it.
But for sure, yeah. So I don't know what would be the solution to say to people that, somebody can post in Lithuanian, somebody can post in English, and it's going to be fine. But yeah, for sure, globalization always poses these kind of questions. Some people would say the religion keeps the identity of the diaspora. And that's why Lithuanian diaspora was criticized, because we are not, maybe, as you said, the first wave, we're quite religious, but then now we are quite agnostic if you look at the statistics of Eurostat in Europe. So, yeah, but maybe the Facebook groups in the digital age makes us Lithuanians and sharing the recipes. So I'm not really sure.
I mean, well, these are serious questions, important questions, though answers to them is kind of individual. It's, as a community, we can vote and create some kind of statement about who is real Lithuanian and how much Lithuanianness is enough. But the answer will be given by you and me. And by individual, you're going to answer that question, what is Lithuanian enough for you? So I guess answer, really like Lithuanian American community, they had to basically answer who we're going to consider Lithuanian enough. And answer to that is if one of 4 of your grandparents is Lithuanian, we're going to consider you Lithuanian. Also, if Lithuanian woman has an American husband, and he wants to be a member in our community, we're going to accept him. We're going to accept him as a spouse. And, and nobody going to tell him you don't belong here. If you want to belong here, come on over. Usually it doesn't happen, but people from Venezuela just comes and say, we want to be in your community. It just does not happen.
But is there a special task they need to complete? I have an American boyfriend, and I can make, tell him, I don't know, does he need to learn Grybų karas, the poem in Lithuanian, or is there a special thing that the spouses need to do?
I am in these kind of chairmanship positions. I was chairman of Atlanta and South. So we have to answer these kind of questions because we have long list of, and, for 98% of people, it's not even a question. Somebody came in, he's Lithuanian, you in the list. You want to be on a list, you're on a list. But sometimes you have to have some kind of understanding and rule. But basically, it's not really a problem we have to resolve, because if person wants to be in our community or our mailing list, we accept them. Because people who don't have any reason to be in Lithuanian community, they just simply do not come. So it's not a problem we have to solve because it does not exist.
And how was it for you? Because you didn't grow up in US, so you came as an outsider, in a sense, to the community that was already formed for 70 years, right? And You came, and the Lithuania, that was the image of Lithuania in that community was a bit different from the Lithuania you left. Like my Lithuanian literature teacher would say that Lithuanians from the first generation, Lithuanian Americans, would imagine Lithuania with these roofs made of straws, and everybody, like from the Antano Škėma books. And did you meet them and sort of saw that image? And how was it different?
For me, that connecting to Lithuanian community came natural because when I came, I had relatives. I had many relatives in New York, in Cleveland, in Chicago, in Los Angeles. I had many relatives in many, many countries, many cities and states. So in the beginning, I visited, I talked to all of them. I lived in my uncle's house. So I immersed very naturally in that community was created by second wave. And when I came, the third wave wasn't kind of really represented very strongly at that time. It was like 30 years ago. So there was nothing else to join. And I always was, when Sąjūdis was in Lithuania, I've participated in that and everything. So I always was this kind of political and patriotic person. So it was interesting to me. So when I came to the United States, they introduced me to newspapers, to organizations, to what they have, a church, a club, So I very quickly became familiar how they function, what they have. And it looked very natural way for me to exist and to start your life. Later, when I moved to Atlanta, I myself was very surprised that there is like hundreds and thousands of third wave new immigrants who just live there. They have their own clubs and little circles. And we have no idea about all this second wave organization. Like Miami would be like a huge example of that. I sometimes ask people in Atlanta, do you know about shalfas or do you know about basketball tournaments and everything? And we have no idea. We have no idea. Like in the United States, sometimes when there is like a basketball tournament of all different ages, there is like 20, 30 teams and you cannot get a hotel room because it's all booked by Lithuanians. Imagine all this kind of gathering. And it's not only basketball, it's also dinners and breakfast and friends meeting each other and so on. And it's big, big event. So for me, it came in naturally. But third wave, a lot of them who probably didn't have relatives, they probably came because they had other friends of third wave. And I think what happened quite often, they maybe went to second wave and second and third wave didn't immediately become friendly or friends. So they kind of visited them a couple times and left and started living their lives separately. But right now is change of these generations. For example, I could say right now, third generation is probably dominating the organized life, as far as Lithuanian American community. Current president of Lithuanian American community is a third wave. He already third wave immigrant. President before him, Sigita Šimkuvienė, also third wave and so on. So, if you look at the organizations who has like deciding power, how Lithuanian American life going to look like here, third generation is already kind of in majority, I would say. Because, the fact that we were born in Lithuania, they speak Lithuanian usually better than English still. And being Lithuanians for them is not a choice. They can't, they cannot shake it off. They cannot choose to be Americans because they simply are not Americans. For second generation, for DP, they have a choice to be dual, to be American, or to be more Lithuanian.
Yeah, it's interesting. Is it as well related to the age, maybe? It's when you sort of had a family, you already raised your kids, and then you're sort of, okay, I want to be with my community. Or it's more about bridging and bonding in a sense that you live in U.S. together and understand the culture as a community instead of as an individual who joins from outside.
Well, I'm talking about second generation. I'm talking about they be younger than me. They could be of any age. They just simply are descendants of people who emigrated after World War II, right? So they were born in America. And here is the interesting thing. It really brought home to me. I have a cousin who was born in the United States, and he grew up and he's similar age like me. And he told to me, Jure, I grew up not quite understanding my identity. Am I American or am I Lithuanian? It was some kind of dual, his English is better than his Lithuanian. He was born here. And he said, I continue living like this. I'm some kind of dual citizen, And that's the answer about what's more important, language or identity. He said, it took me to go after Sąjūdis started. I went to Lithuania for the first time. And he said, once I landed in Vilnius airport, it took me about 20 seconds to understand who I am. And I understood that I am American. Because once I came to real Lithuania, I immediately understood what my identity is actually over there in America, not here. And as I said, you could very well say that kind of Lithuanian-American identity exists.
Yeah, it's like American Italians, completely different. Like one of my coworkers, he's Italian. He went to US, met American Italians, completely different people from real Italians. It's a limbo state, and people just lock the culture of that time. They bring to other country and they continue living in that sort of time, and their kids grow up somewhere else. And unfortunately, the same happened, I think, with Polish. I have quite a few American friends who have Polish surnames, and just the surname is left. As well, Ukrainians. I know my boyfriend has, in Minneapolis, Tom, he's descendant Ukrainian. He knows how to make great borscht. But other than that, we were talking about current affairs in Ukraine, and there's not that much because you already had your grandparents and you relate to that, but not that much anymore because your life is in US. But then I really liked what you mentioned about genealogy, because I heard that this is a top one hobby in US now, and people love having these heritage trips. Have you met anybody who was doing that? How does it look like?
Oh, I am also interested in my own genealogy. And actually, I started being interested in that myself because my family had some genealogy trees. Plus, I had all these relatives in United States, mostly in the United States, but also Australia, a few other places. But all of these people were my third or fourth cousins, uncles, and everything. So, you really need some kind of map to guide you through all this, Who are you now? My third, or what is a fifth cousin anyway? So it's kind of interesting. But when I first time came to United States, that was basically my guiding map, you enter somebody's house and that's the first thing you put on the table. And that's an icebreaker, and that's you figure out, because it's interesting to me, interesting to them. That's what connects us. Because I do really have a lot of third, fourth cousins whom I haven't met half of them yet, all of them, but I did a lot. But we're talking about people who my parents or maybe even my grandparents never met. But we are connected. I think a lot of Americans like to have that third dimension to their personality, because it brings, maybe they know some kind of other language and everything. And so they kind of cherish that heritage if they have it, and they are interested in it, generously are.
So you meet a person. I have actually as well, fifth cousin in Berlin. Our great grandmothers were sisters. It's quite cool. But Juras, you have more experience. What do you do next? What do you talk about? Do you try to find the similarities in the facial or some kind of habits?
Oh, I don't know. I'm probably going to have to spill the beans. My great-grandfather is composer Čiurlionis. So that's why all people who are related to the great artist kind of want to be on a tree. So that's why this genealogical, we even ordered the professional research to dig as far as possible into Čiurlionis family genealogical tree. So we have a lot of things to talk about. It's not like we don't know anything about each other. We do, because once there was more reason for communication, a lot of members of the family escaped World War II and advancing Russian army. So they communicated with Lithuania. It was important to them, right? Because, you always want something you cannot have, right? So all these people living behind the Iron Curtain, it was important to have that connection. It's important to find out if certain relatives are alive, if your house where you grew up is still there, and so on, So all these people who were in America, it was important. Actually, being quite young, I already noticed, but we keep connection with these third and fourth cousins in America, but we also have them in Lithuania, right? But we don't keep that much, and usually occasion for all the third, fourth cousins in Lithuania to meet each other is when American cousin is coming. Well, back then it was, when you live behind Iron Curtain, there was certain other interest to see the people from the free world, of course. So it was never a question what to talk about. It just was never enough time to talk about. Actually, I have a very, very interesting episode from the time of Sąjūdis. When we lived in Lithuania behind the Iron Curtain, and people already start coming more and more, in 80s, starting in 70s, then in 80s, all these visitors from the United States would come visit my grandparents in our home. So, of course, whenever they came, they were major event, right? Meetings, dinners, all kind of cousins coming. Everybody, their schedules are dead busy. Everybody wants to talk to them, see what they have to say about Australia or United States. Now, then 1989 came, and my cousin from Cleveland came to visit us for the first time, and somebody from Vilnius bringing him to Kaunas. And as soon as they walk into our house, we start talking. What's happening? What kind of meeting? Sąjūdis this, Sąjūdis that, and everything. And oh, cousin, you are still here. Okay, well, how is your life in America? Okay, he starts talking. In 2 minutes, we're talking about Sąjūdis again. And when we start apologizing to him, we're sorry, we're sorry we're not kind of giving you enough time and attention. But my American cousin said, you know what? It's actually nothing could be more interesting and exciting to me to see you so excited, so involved, so passionate, and of course, about all the real changes. So he said, don't mind me. I'm having time of my life.
So what do you think now? It's 30 years after Lithuania gained independence. How do you see it, Lithuania, the change and the progress it made? What kind of, give me some sort of ideas. 90s, it was a struggle for sure, as they call it, was Gariūnai decade, and then 2000s, and now we have quite a growth.
Yes, well, since I remember I was involved and was reading and paying attention in Sąjūdis time when people were fighting for independence, everybody thought, definitely the expectation what real change and improvement gonna come faster. Let's start from positive. Right now, what's happening in Lithuania, I see it as a very, very positive. It is so many good news. Lithuania is becoming this innovative, progressive, and free and cool country. Actually, there is more and more of that coming. I think it's becoming a country which is interesting to visit and to live in. So I see definitely a lot positive, and that's probably in last 5 years. So if sometime during time of Sąjūdis, somebody would tell me, well, change gonna come, but it's gonna take one generation to do that, I think I would be pretty sad and depressed to hear what reality will be so long. But I think it's finally coming.
Yeah, so about the change in the politics. Now we're going through election time, both in US and Lithuania. So how is it from the perspective of Lithuanian who can see both election times? And can you tell us more how the community is acting together to participate in Lithuanian elections? And do you have a common opinion for the US elections?
Well, first I have to say I am a dual citizen. I have two citizenships, Lithuanian and American. Well, it's always seemed to be some kind of honorary title, some kind of badge you can wear on some kind of proper occasion. But right now, I really felt the challenge may mean to be a dual citizen if you are kind of politically active and interested person, especially right now when it's kind of like a fire burning in both Lithuania and in America. it's kind of you want to be interested in both. I am, as you mentioned, involved in Facebook and everything, and so I kind of involved in distributing information. You know very well, we both are in Dabar and everything, so we both were involved in. So I sent some information about Lithuanian election, but then now I need to send something about American election, but that Juras from Lithuanian election is in my way, is creating all this traffic, creating informational traffic jams, so it actually is sometimes difficult because only so much information about politics people can take and handle before they maybe disconnect from you or block you or something, or gonna start considering you some kind of source of spam and so on. So being dual citizen in this situation was quite a challenge. Interesting. Now, participating in Lithuanian elections, I think we go by somewhat similar formula, like if you take all immigrants and kind of look at the statistics and the numbers, how many of them actually participate in Lithuanian life, right? Dance festivals, movies, traditional, jonines, everything. There is not a huge percent who are really actually active in the life. They create all the life. They create everything what's visible. But there is this big invisible part of Lithuanians who kind of are passive, less interested in everything. So it is a little bit similar with political life also. There is a certain growing population of politically active Lithuanians who are very interested in that. There is certain people who, they are Lithuanians, they live in America, but they are not citizens. Maybe they are also a little bit offended about dual citizenship question and everything. But what's definitely very noticeable, and I kind of say to a lot of people this thing, what this global citizenry of Lithuanians is a real thing. It's not somebody's passion, somebody's second job, or somebody's hobby. Thing. First thing, there is 30,000 dual citizens already, right? There is a huge part of diaspora who actually live between two countries. They travel back and forth a lot. Their connections are very strong. So to say something what we don't know what's happening in Lithuania or everything, no, we do know. We do know. It's not all of them, but there is this segment of Lithuanian immigration who can qualify 100% to be dual citizens or global citizens, because that's how they live. And also there is a lot of students, there is a lot of people who work abroad and so on and so on. And it's interesting. I'm going to make comparison to America. Somebody just told me on Facebook, one American, like, how come Americans who don't even live in the United States would vote in American elections? Well, that was really an uneducated and stupid question. There is 9 million Americans living abroad permanently. 9 million. And of course they vote. I lived in Amsterdam myself. Like half of Amsterdam is Americans who live there permanently, so...
Yeah, Berlin too. A lot of Americans. And even in the bookstores here that sells books in English, if you go to the toilet, there's a sticker now saying, if you are American citizen, please go and vote. And even the link.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, and one of our friends, Patrick, here in Berlin, they call people in Germany, Americans, and tell them to vote. So they actually as well work quite hard to promote the idea of voting. And now they will have election night as well.
Awesome. I'm glad to hear that, because I also was kind of paying attention and interested in social media and so on in 2016 when presidential elections were happening. So at that time, there was a drive. Somebody remembered, wait a minute, we have 9 million, meaning 9 million. It's like one state. I live in state of Georgia, has 10 million population. So there is whole state of Georgia living somewhere outside of America, and they could vote. 9 million people, if they would vote in any kind of synchronicity, they could decide every election in history. So I haven't heard that, but it's good to hear what somebody remembered to call up those Americans who live abroad.
Yeah, it's true. And they are very different as well, in a sense that global Americans, I think, as well, have different opinions about certain questions. The same with Lithuanians. When you live outside, you understand your own identity better. You see the difference, I guess.
I guess, again, that's not what you're saying. It's one party is much more interested to contact those Americans who live abroad and in Europe than the other, I guess.
Yeah, so I was just reading that Polish Americans, they tend to be Republican because of the historical reasons and the party affiliation in US. So, people choose to be Republican or, one or another, and then they sort of join the community and mostly vote in that way. Is there any kind of way Lithuanians affiliate to one party? Is it the same as all other like immigrants from Europe, like Polish and others, or there like a different waves of voting behavior?
First thing, let's say, like, if to answer this question, Lithuanian Americans, are they more Democrat or Republican? So I kind of am and was interested for a long time in this question and everything. And I talked to ambassadors, talked to Lithuanian community presidents, not about this specifically, but in general about statistics and how we know the numbers, statistics, polling and everything. And I can tell you, if somebody gonna tell you they know, that is not true, because nobody knows. Okay, nobody really counts us. Nobody knows how to count us. When I talk to consuls and ambassadors, they know certain numbers, but real numbers are always some kind of guesstimates, right? So that's even how many Lithuanians we live, right? If we have people who want us not to find them, we'll be successful in that. But they're still going to vote, right? They're still going to probably count in the United States Census and everything. So real numbers are a little bit difficult to grasp. Now, historically, if we go 25 years ago, I think, Reagan time, Bush time, independence time, historically, a lot of Lithuanian American diaspora were kind of mostly Republican because it was believed what Republican Party holds more favorable use towards Lithuania's independence. Both parties did, but just Republicans were more explicit about it, more stronger about it, be made an issue about it more, fighting Cold War and so on. So most, it's at least active. Again, this complicated questions. As I already mentioned, there are two groups of Lithuanians. Small group who are active and who make all kinds of decisions in Lithuanian life because they participate in life and create that life, right? And there is this much bigger section of passive Lithuanians who don't participate, and it is much harder to understand what they think, what they want, how they vote, because they don't express themselves so much. But in Facebook time, they come out and they talk, not all of them. I think general situation with current election and with Trump being president and one of the candidates right now, the situation changed. If you would ask me, a lot of Lithuanians moved to vote against Trump and everything. So I think maybe situation is like 50-50 more right now. If somebody would say it's 60-40 or 40-60, it's probably also. So it's somewhere in the middle, There is a clear support for one candidate, clear support for the other candidate, and it's somewhat balanced. It's not only one or the other. But I think because I am involved in this Lithuanian community and organized life, I think what those Lithuanian decision makers are more on the liberal side. And I think that comes from a rather simple thing. Just think about what kind of people are in Lithuanian community, who comes and organizes with and everything. They are altruistic. They are willing to work without payment, right? They think about others. Why they do that? Just for themselves? No, they want something better for everybody. So that's a little bit how liberal people think.
Yeah,
not all of them.
However, it can be very conservative. You do something for your country, for your community. It's more like, the clothes. And conservatives can be as well altruistic. It's just a different group affiliation, right?
Correct. Let's say if you take religious people, right? They believe in certain things, they believe in certain idea, and they for sure sometimes will be willing to spend a lot of their times for that idea, right? And they, being religious, they could be also conservative, not always. So, it can be all kind of aspects and can be very complicated. I'm just saying my personal opinion, what, Lithuanians were mostly Republican 25 years ago. But I think especially for this election and 4 years ago, there is a huge shift towards Democratic Party, towards voting Democratic. I mean, there is a lot of Lithuanians who consider themselves Republicans and now publicly declaring what they're going to vote for Biden. I'm a Republican. I'm traditional Republican. I'm going to vote for Biden. And that's just because who Trump is,
And especially what he says about NATO, about responsibility from Lithuanian perspective, like his relationship with Putin, the ideas that, there are some secret talks and things like that. And for sure, Lithuania is like the best friend of US. We always try to be politically affiliated. But then, Trump in 2018, when the Lithuanian, Latvian, and Estonian presidents came to visit him, talked about the war in Yugoslavia and our responsibility because he mixed up both.
Well, it's, in this Lithuanian-American discourse, it is kind of interesting because there are something what most Lithuanians agree upon. And they agree, all of us, we agree on one thing, what NATO is good, right? NATO is definitely good. Most of us agree on it. And another thing is Putin is bad, right? So when we have this discourse and kind of debates between Trump supporters and Biden supporters, both sides accuse each other that your decision it will be worse for NATO and your decision somehow pro-Putin, right? Nobody wants to be on Putin's side or Putin's friend. But so both sides came up with all kinds of arguments. Well, to say what either one president or the other president will be better for Lithuanian security and safety, will be better for NATO, and will be better to counter Putin. We just have totally different kind of arguments, which, some, in my opinion, some of them are real and some of them are a little bit fake.
For sure. And we will know actually soon how it will end, the elections and both elections. And let's see what will happen. The winds of change are coming, hopefully, in one or other country. So I wanted to say thank you for coming and speaking with us today. And I would like to ask you a question I always ask to everyone who comes to this podcast. So what is your own personal dream for Lithuania for upcoming decades?
Maybe we already touched a little bit on that, but that is my idea. I definitely wish what Lithuania gonna be this innovative, creative, free, and cool country. What it will be nice place to visit, where people are energetic, enthusiastic. Certainly, Lithuania had this difficult because we live in a bad neighborhood of countries. And a lot of Lithuanians were repressed and definitely national character have suffered. But I definitely think, and I see what it's definitely developing. It's taking time. It's a little bit slow. But definitely my wish for Lithuania, it's going to be this interesting, progressive European country, as it always was meant to be that way,
The plan was 30 years ago. It was there. It just took a bit too long, but we're on the way. So thank you so much for sharing how Lithuanians in US are living. I think it's going to be super interesting for even Lithuanians in Lithuania to listen to this podcast because we have the image of diaspora, I think, a bit different than it is actually. So thank you so much, Juras, for coming to our podcast.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. It was my pleasure.
And to our listeners, thank you for joining us today. If you want to know more about this topic or listen to other episodes of Lithuanian Dream Podcast, just go to our website, lithuaniandreampodcast.com, or follow us on social media, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram There you can find all our episodes that are now getting closer to the 40. Yes, we are already online streaming for a year, which is incredibly amazing. I would like to say thank you to our team and invite you to listen to our podcast next week. So I hope you're keeping yourself healthy and speak to you next week.